Hello, welcome back to my channel. I am Four Corners of the Page and I'm so glad you're here. Today I have a tier list video for you, which might not seem the most original concept on the face of the earth, but I don't really mind for two reasons. And the first reason is that I really like tier lists. There's something about them that really scratch that quasi-semi-intellectual part of the brain, that statistical-minded side where you can take all these things, even something subjective like art, and put them in a line. There's something quite enjoyable about that, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks that. But the second reason that I really wanted to do this tier list is because I just adore the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It is my favourite series, and it has a lot of sentimental value to me. The first time I read it, I was, I think, about 19 through 20. It took me about a year to read that first main 10. But subsequently, I've read them all 3 times, I think, with the exception of The God Is Not Willing. This series I just think is marvellous. I think it's one of those series that will stand the test of time and still be read 50, 60 years down the line. And it's been really lovely, actually, to watch in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, the community maybe double and triple in size. And I'm not really sure what the reason for that is. It could be that so many people are putting out videos on them, videos with maybe some more substance than this one. But also I think COVID might have had a hand in it, people looking for something decent to read, and it could just be also word of mouth. But for whatever reason, watching the community grow larger and larger has been a real delight, because when I read it 10 years ago, I could not find for the life of me answers to some of the questions I had. I mean, there were people obviously who were reading it with publication. I think I read book 1 about the time that book 10 had just been published. So I had all of them in front of me, and I had some people to ask questions to, but the community isn't nearly where it is right now. So it's really been a joy to be part of that online, and it's something that I want to do more of actually with this channel, is maybe after summer when I can get my hands on my physical copies and I move back home, I can start to maybe produce some content on individual scenes and chapters in Malazan, maybe have some discussions about the books with people who also love them to pieces. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. I have 5 tiers. What I should say is that everything from great and above, so great, superb, tippy top, there can be only 1 or perhaps 2, would be a 5-star read. Perhaps the top end of 4 stars for great, but I think all of them from here on up would in any other tier list ranking just be that top strip. Yep is kind of reserved for things that I think maybe have some more significant flaws to them, or maybe just something that I need to reread. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and have a nice bell curve here. As much as I want to put them all at the top, that's not as interesting, and I do want to try and stratify them a bit more than that. You might also notice that I don't have Ian Esselmont and his Malazan works on this tier list, and that's no hate towards Ian Esselmont. In fact, I'm doing this kind of as a mark of respect, because I do think the 2 authors have different styles, and Steven Erikson is my favourite author of all time, so I would hate to put him at the top and then for it to look as though Ian Esselmont's fine novels are not of any worth at all, because I don't think that is the case. Certainly, I think his Path to Ascendancy series, for example, is just great, and I would recommend that to anyone too. So I would rather do it in this way, keep them separately. Maybe later on do an Esselmont tier list if that's something that there is interest in. I should also say this is my second time filming this video, because the first time it had reached about 55 minutes because I was gushing about every book for about 7 or 8 minutes, and that's not worth anybody's time. So what I'm going to try and do here is keep it a bit more fast, a bit more clipped, maybe 45 seconds or so per book, so we can get through them in a sensible amount of time, which I definitely was not doing on take 1. So I'm going to start off with Gardens of the Moon, and I'm going to put Gardens of the Moon in great, and I mean that as an enthusiastic great and not a subpar great. I think that Gardens of the Moon gets a lot of undeserved criticism. People say things along the line of, you have to really get through book 1 to really understand what Malazan is about, or you have to get through book 1 to get to the really good stuff, and I think there's a lot of good stuff in Gardens of the Moon. I think the ending is a bit frenetic and rushed. I think the idea that the book is incomprehensible at the beginning is not accurate. I think anchoring everything in that one city of Darujistan does take away some of that confusion that you will have. It does take a while to get used to Erikson's characterization, and that's not because his characterization is poor. It's not poor, but you do get less time on the page with each of the large cast of characters that is put in front of you, so that might take some adjustment. But on the whole, I think Gardens of the Moon is a really lovely book. It's probably one of the ones I've read the most, and I love doing it by audiobook as well. I think it's very digestible via audiobook, but it's true, somewhat eclipsed by Deadhouse Gates. Now, if you're unfamiliar, I should say that there will be some minor spoilers to the books, nothing too significant going forward. I'm not going to talk about deaths or anything like that. But Deadhouse Gates is it's so good. And what Erikson does is he takes maybe 1 or 2 characters from book 1, takes them to a new continent and just begins a new story that has very little, seemingly on the surface of it, to do with Gardens of the Moon, which in and of itself is a bit of a baller move, to be honest. I think that's just, I love this book to pieces. The ending is cathartic and awful and magical, and I can't say anything about it because I've just said no spoilers, but I'm just going to keep making sound effects for Dead House Gates. I do think maybe the first half, you feel like you're kind of trying to catch on to that moving train again. And I think maybe some of the stuff in the first half, bar a couple of scenes, feels a little bit more expository than what comes later, which is quite a weird criticism to make of Malazan as the whole, because, we were told that there's very little exposition to the series, but if there is some, it's kind of in Dead House Gates. I think this is great. There is a bit of sentimental value for me and this book, because it kept me sane. When my son was born, I wasn't allowed in the hospital until the very, very moment of my child's birth, because it was during COVID. And the rules where I was at that time were that you could not go into the hospital until the absolute 11th hour. So I spent 2 days, look at me making my son's birth all about me. I spent 2 days in a hotel next to the hospital, frankly just going mad, waiting for the phone call that I could run to the hospital. And all I had was a battered copy of Dead House Gate, so I read that book to pieces. And it really, really helped salve some of that frenetic energy that I had. Superb. I love Dead House Gates. I would put Memories of Ice, though, tippy top. Ooh, superb. Tippy top. Tippy top for now. You return to that initial cast of characters from book one, but then Erikson, I would say, and people don't really talk about this as much as I think they should, sweeps that rug out from under you again, because although you're back in that same continent, I would say that the characters you really feel for and stick with are not really the same characters from book one, with a couple of exceptions. You do get introduced to a stack of new people, and some of them are the most impactful members of that cast. Itkovian, for example, Gruntle, and Stony. I'd put them both together. I really like this book, and the great thing about Memories of Ice, that last third of the book, is just a constellation of moments. It all coheres very well, but there's a constellation of scenes that happen one after the other that are just, some of them are horrible, some of them are wonderful, some of them are magical, but they're all deeply memorable. And so you just have this barrage of moments at the end that just hit you one after the other and just punch into your long-term memory. I think I could narrate a bunch of this book to you, even though the last time I read it was about 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm noticing as I'm talking about it that I'm getting faster and faster because, this book is so good. You can also take Gardens of the Moon, Dead House Gates, Memory of Ice as a trilogy and feel satisfied with that. But I doubt many people would, because you really do, if you've gotten this far, you do have the bug. I'm also, I should say, looking forward to the sub-press editions that are coming out. Not sub-press, pardon me. The Broken Binding editions that are coming out very shortly for this Malazan trilogy, because I think they're going to be beautiful, and I'm excited to have those hardbacks on my shelf. But I did say 45 seconds per book, so we're going to move on to House of Chains. Again, I should stop speaking so quickly. I'm just so excited to talk about these books. Great. I understand completely artistically what Erikson was doing with the first quarter of this book, where he takes one character, the character of Karsa Orlong, and he maintains that single POV for about a minute, for about, I'm going to say a hot minute, about 250 pages, I think it is. You're not supposed to enjoy the character of Karsa, and I get that. And I get that this was a narrative device that was fully intentional, but it does slow the book down for me. I don't mind the ending. A lot of people have issues with the ending of House of Chains. They call it anticlimactic. I don't. And I really love the building up of the Bonehunters that you get in this book. That scene with the scorpion halfway through really exemplifies this for me. I love getting to know all these new soldiers that you stay with for a long period of time. But I do think that first quarter just did everything it was supposed to do, and it wasn't for me. But Midnight Tides, there can be only one. Let's put it there for now, and I might have to shunt it down. I describe Midnight Tides to people as the most standalone of the Malazan books. And the sequel, I'm looking at Reaper's Gale right there, but I think Midnight Tides feels like the most complete Malazan book there is. It tells a complete narrative from beginning to end. You have tragedy, comic relief, mysteries that are set up and resolved, a really satisfying ending again that can stand on its own. It does everything so well, and it does it while not relying on any of the 4 books previously. You're starting off with a new continent from scratch again, and it doesn't matter because Erikson just tells this story masterfully. Midnight Tides, I would also say, is the most sparing in its size. The word count, I think it's the smallest Malazan book. Maybe perhaps Gardens of the Moon is slightly shorter, but it doesn't waste a lot of pages. It doesn't waffle. It's very tight book, and I really enjoy that for that. It doesn't feel like there's a wasted page. And although Malazan as a whole has a reputation for being a 3 million word short story, I think is the quote, of all of them, I think Midnight Tides really sums that up, and I just adore this book. It's magical. The Bonehunters, I'm going to be a bit controversial here. Top of great, bottom of superb. Bottom of superb for now. I used to rank the Bonehunters as my favourite of the Malazan books, and I have revised that opinion. Because I think when I say I love the Bonehunters, what I mean is I love Chapter 7 of the Bonehunters, this really long sequence that I won't get into because I'll talk about it forever and ever. And I love the ending of the Bonehunters. But that's what I love about this book. I really don't think that it's the full 1,200 pages that I enjoy. I think I really enjoy those two sections a lot. And the other parts of the book I would rank kind of similar to House of Chains. You know, plodding along with these characters, getting to know them, those interactions that really are golden and amazing. But I think the Bonehunters sometimes goes a bit high in people's estimations. And what they're really talking about are a couple of specific scenes and chapters, which are some of the best the series has to offer. Reaper's Gale, down here. And I don't know if that's a controversial opinion or not. I see quite a lot of mixed opinions about Reaper's Gale. It just isn't for me, out of all the books. You know what? Actually, I'm going to stand by that. I'm going to put it down here. Again, it's doing everything it's supposed to be doing. I think... That's a long pause, isn't it? I think I often have an issue with a certain type of book. And I have the same feeling about Wind and Truth, which I'm on the back 20% in right now, where the plot is set up from the beginning. And you know, even if you don't know what the outcome is going to be, you know that the ending of the book is going to be this event. And that, unfortunately, is kind of what happens here in Reaper's Gale, where you have one of the main chunks of story kind of prescribed from the beginning. There's a contest of sorts, well, similar to Wind of Truth, that you know is going to happen at the end of the book, and so you just feel like you're spending a lot of pages building towards this event, which, when it's handled, is handled really, really well and doesn't go where you think it's going to go. But a lot of the conversations just feel like we are waiting for this event to occur, and that drags the book down for me. I think also that the tone of this series, this book in particular, is a bit too heavy for me, and if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about, and I won't get into that too much. Reaper's Gale, I still love it. It's still great. Nothing is in yet so far, but I think if I were to organise the 10 books in a line, Reaper's Gale is the one that I always look forward to reading, maybe the least, for those reasons. But then we get to Toll the Hounds, which is, it's going straight to the top. Excuse me, Midnight Tides, we have a new champion in the ring. Toll the Hounds is my favourite book of all time. People call it turgid. People don't enjoy the narrative style as much sometimes. I disagree with all of that. I think that Toll the Hounds is the crowning achievement in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. The ending, spectacular. The stuff that happens along the way, spectacular. That narrative voice is exemplary, and I love it so much. And I don't think people are give it as much. I think people call it a Marmite voice. I don't think it is a Marmite voice. I think the character who is giving the narration here takes on a more lyrical tone and a more wise tone than you often see from him in previous books. So I don't think, people call it the Crippled book. You either like it or you don't like it. I don't think that's true. I think that the narrative voice has shifted from this character from the beginning, and just it goes to such sublime places. Toll the Hounds, and I've already mentioned the ending. Those last 300 pages, you can't put them down. They are incredible, and this book does feel like a natural resolution to, I would say, about half or 2/3 of the storylines of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It feels like the final book in some ways, and it rounds things off, those plot lines off incredibly well. Dust of Dreams is going past Memories of Ice, which I know is a controversial opinion, because a lot of people don't really seem to enjoy Dust of Dreams, because it's the first half of a pair of books. You know, Dust of Dreams and the Crippled God kind of go hand in hand to a lot of people. And when I read Dust of Dreams for the first time, it wasn't my favourite book. I would probably have put it down towards the back end of great. I didn't understand a lot of the plot lines, I'll be honest. It took me a reread to really work out what was going on. It felt like the pace was quite glacial. I now really believe that Dust of Dreams is a superb meditation on purpose. A lot of the characters in this book are going through a kind of wastelandy setting, just contemplating the reasons for what they're doing, which sounds slow, and it is slow, but it's handled really well. And I don't think also it's fair to call it the first half of 2 books. I know Erikson himself calls it the first half of 2 books. I think there is a really brilliant finale to this book, which if I were to finish it and then I had to wait a year for the next book, I would not feel like I was wanting. In fact, I think this ending is one of the best endings of the entire series so far, in a series chock full of amazing endings. Dust of Doom spectacular. And I don't think it, again, like Gardens of the Moon, deserves the lower end of the scale reputation that it often gets. Oh, ask me on a different day and this will go in different places. I'm going to put The Crippled God just just above Memories of Ice. All of these 3 are the wafer-thin gaps between them. It is such a spectacular, satisfying ending to the series. It does, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 characters I'm thinking of, sums things up satisfactorily without feeling like you're having a tidy ribbon put on the whole experience. Nothing here really feels very trite or convenient. And even when the endings are happy, they don't feel unearned. Everything in this novel at the end feels absolutely earned. I don't think I've ever had a greater sense of reading catharsis than when I finished The Crippled God. And that's not to say that every plot line is resolved. If you look back at these 10 books, you'll notice that there are probably 4 or 5 or 6, maybe even more, threads that are just stopped. And we haven't yet, there's more books to come in this world, but we haven't yet seen a conclusion to them. But what The Crippled God does is it leaves everything so thematically tied up and satisfied. You don't feel like you need to burrow into every corner and every nook and cranny, because the overall picture has been concluded so well. And I'm maybe slowing down as I'm talking here because I'm thinking about a couple of scenes that have just stuck into my brain. And yeah, Crippled God. For me, the back half of Malazan Book of the Fallen is probably superior to the first half, and I'm wondering if that's your opinion as well. I'm going to move a bit more quickly for the sake of time. Let's do Balkaline and Corbob Roach. I think the first group of series, the first 3 books, I'm going to put into yep. They're enjoyable, they're fine, they're nice. I like them. Light-hearted, somewhat crass humour, with a bunch of side characters. That is very enjoyable. I liked it a lot, but I don't think there's anything of great merit here. If anyone said to me, hey, I found this in a used bookshop, should I start with these stories? I probably wouldn't advise them to go with them, because they only work as maybe little... I should rephrase that. They work better as breathers in between these longer books. If you're kind of committed to reading the whole sweep of Malazan, I would put these as palate cleansers. That being said, I think the second set of series, while not touching in the Malazan books, is great. I think the second set of stories is absolutely 4 or 5 stars, especially Cracked Pot Trail, which is one of the 3 novellas here. I think can go toe-to-toe with a lot of the narrative threads in the Malazan series itself. So let's get that over with. Goats of Glory. Some people might not even know about Goats of Glory. Goats of Glory is a short story published in this short story collection, which I can't quite remember. Dark Magic, it looks like it's called. Worth reading. Again, kind of slightly flimsy and light and fun. Palate cleanser material, I would say. We're now left with what I would say is the 3 most controversial books in the Malazan canon. Some people love these. You will never find a more heated opinion among Malazan fans, especially the really hardcore Malazan fans, as to the status of Fall of Light, because for a lot of people Fall of Light is at the very top. What I would do is I would put Forge of Darkness in the superb category. I think it's great. It is dark. If Malazan is a chocolate bar, the Kharkanas trilogy is a 90% cacao chocolate blend, and maybe even that I would say Fall of Light is 99%. It's a thing of dark chocolate that's quite bitter, and you have to take it piece by piece. I would maybe squeak Forge of Darkness ahead of the Bonehunters. Ahead of Deadhouse Gates, actually. I'm going to revise that opinion. There's something really ethereal and creepy about the world of Kharkanas as envisioned by Steven Erikson. And I like that he goes back and he paints a prequel that does not take away the mystery, it adds to the mystery. There's a few scenes in this book that are deeply mysterious, and one especially is very haunting. But what Erikson does really masterfully with this prequel series is he does not show you behind the curtain in a way that takes away from the main 10. And I like Forge of Darkness for that. I also like the character arcs, a lot of the journeys that go on in this book. Oh my goodness, I'm blanking on the name of Arathan, I think his name is. The protagonist of one plot thread of Forge of Darkness really allows you to go on this road trip through the world of Kharkanas. But again, it doesn't take away from the mystery of anything. It really adds to it as he sees all the different parts of this land. And we see a lot of characters, hundreds of thousands of years from where they are in the main 10. And it's just great. It's a really great read. And I think if anyone says to me, should I read Kharkanas after finishing the main 10, I would say you absolutely have to try Forge of Darkness. And I would say as well, buy a paperback or a hardback. Don't go for the Kindle version. It's one of these books that really feels like it needs to be in the hand. Fall of Light, I think I already just said, you will find some Malazan fans quite offended if you put this down low on the list. And part of the reason is that it didn't sell very well. And I think Erikson himself has said that he was quite deflated that this book, which he seems to view as one of his strongest works, did not sell as well as he was hoping to. I think it's the 67 of us who've read it or something like that. I've read this book a few times. And every time I read it, I would put it at different parts. When I first read it, I would probably have put it in Yep, if I'm honest. And the second time I've read it, I would probably put it right at the top. And I think I'm just going to balance this out and put it slightly below Forge of Darkness, which again is quite a controversial opinion. I do feel that some of the characters become secondary to the thematic concerns and the philosophy that Erikson espouses here. The opening battle in Fall of Light is this incredible, bloody, horrible showcase as to what racial conflict and religious conflict and just people messing the pot, stirring the pot can do. And then the ending does something. There's also a battle at the ending, which also really takes a lot of these points and really handles that final conflict in a really interesting way that you don't see coming. But for me, Forge of Darkness is a slightly superior work. And I think it's just because it feels a bit more directed, it feels a bit more focused, and the themes and the characters I think are a bit more hand in hand than you find with Fall of Light. Again, I think both books are extremely worth your time, and as I think I've ranked them here, they stand toe-to-toe with most Malazan books as well. I don't think there's a dip in quality whatsoever. And I totally respect the opinion of anyone who would put this book right to the very top. I need to reread this book, and I'm really excited to, because I know book 2 of the Toplokai Quartet, as it now stands, is coming out soon. Here's a controversial opinion. I think it's a great book. I think a lot of people, especially those clamouring for the return of the Kharkanas trilogy, because the last book, I think Fall of Light, was published in 2016, so we're talking about 8 or 9 years ago now, when The God Is Not Willing dropped, this first book of the Toplokai Quartet. People saw it as a bit of a step down in some ways, and certainly the prose is more simplistic. Certainly it's not as dense reading material as the Kharkanas trilogy. I thought this was a wonderful book. I kind of see this as Erikson returning to his roots that we see in Gardens of the Moon and Dead House Gates and Memories of Ice. This more slightly comedic, slightly more pointed narrative style that is hilarious, and I love the climatological themes that go on here. I love seeing all these really minor characters, such as, is it Spindle? And Damask, I think his name is. These characters who were never at the forefront of the Malazan journey, but now seem to take centre stage, and seeing where they go. And again, one thing that The God Is Not Willing does, more than really any other Malazan book, is it shows the rolling consequences of these historical things that have occurred throughout the main 10. There feels like there's a natural evolution of the world here that doesn't do something like a Joe Abercrombie, although I respect that author greatly, or a Brandon Sanderson, although I respect that author greatly, where they kind of, between their series, just kind of have this artificial moving over in era. You'll go from the medieval era to the cowboy era, or you'll go from through the industrial era, just to get that kind of new flavour, that new setting on top of a pre-established world. What The God Is Not Willing does really well is it evolves the series naturally based on what has happened on the previous 10 books. And I really respect that, and I think that's a really clever thing to do. And some of my favourite characters in the whole series actually come up in The God Is Not Willing. And I'm really keen to give it a reread. And I'm curious, when I do reread it, if it's going to go up or down. I will do that reread before May, because book 2 is coming out soon. But yeah, what I have done here is quite a nice little bell curve, isn't it? I'm quite pleased how that turned out. I didn't plan out these rankings in advance. Please let me know what you think of this ranking Do you agree or disagree? Do you agree or disagree with my, I was going to call it my rationale, but to be honest, a bit more of a ramble in places, a bit more of a gush in places. This video still managed to be 25 minutes long. I love this series to pieces, and I would encourage you that if you are interested in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, maybe stick around and subscribe, because there's going to be a lot more Malazan content coming as I get more of a handle on what this channel is and what I want it to be. Certainly one thing I want it to be is a Malazan content focused channel. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking around, and thank you if you leave any comments. Also, if you are, last thing I would say is, if you do enjoy Malazan, please let me know if there's any comparable series. I read The God Is Not, not The God Is Not Willing, I read The Darkness That Comes Before at the end of last year, the start of this year, because people recommended it off the back of me loving Malazan. If you think there is a similar series that I would love based on what I have just espoused here, please recommend it to me. I'm always looking for new recommendations, even though my poor bookshelf can't really accommodate it physically, I'll find a way. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video, which I think is going to be a review of The Golden Fool by Robin Hobb. So see you there. Thanks.